Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazell, and this is Dev Dive, a show where I get a chance to talk to interesting game developers about their games. And today, I am joined by Kristy Norindr and Mark Essen from Messhof to talk about their new game, Wheel World, which, as of the publishing of this video, is out today, and you can go buy it. And I think you should. I played it myself, and I really quite enjoyed it. But we're here to get the story behind it, and Kristy and Mark's journey to making this game, their history with the games industry, and everything about Wheel World, which is something you guys have been working on for a very long time. And I'm excited and frankly kind of honored to have you guys here to tell the story of what went into this game.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I'm really excited to dig in, but I also think it's important for this to kind of be a comprehensive look into you and Wheel World, to talk about your history with game development and what leads you to making Wheel World. And so, Kristy, we'll start with you, and I guess you guys can kind of go back and forth. I know your stories are kind of intertwined in that way, about what went into you getting into video games and then obviously leading up to making Wheel World.
Sure. Let's see. Getting into video games. I played a lot as a kid, and then kind of dropped off, and I rediscovered games around the tail end of the Xbox 360 era, and started playing Gears of War and Rainbow Six Vegas 2, and just really fell in love with games again. And then I was in grad school at the time, and I started writing about games and kind of doing video game theory. Found myself in the really falling in love with the indie game world and trying to figure out, okay, after grad school, how can I work on indie games? I fell into the opposite kind of game job after graduate school. I was working at a social game company as a producer, and at the same time, I met Mark, and we started working together outside of our own jobs and school. So that's kind of how I fell into the indie game world and games in general.
Yeah. And Mark, what about you? What's your story with your journey into gaming?
Yeah, I also grew up playing games. Had a Nintendo, and had two other brothers, and we played a lot of stuff. I guess I grew up in the era where like CD-ROMs and burning copies of games became like a thing. Like in middle school, I discovered like ROMs, then I discovered that, and then it was just like, oh, how many games can I collect and play? So I just play. I mean, how many games can I back up and then play the originals of?
Sure.
So, and and that was great. I was just like, I mean, it was such an education. And then I discovered I wanted to make games, but I didn't really know much about computers besides like browsing the web and stuff. So I searched for game making tools, and I came across this one called Game Maker. I've been using that ever since, and just making little projects. That's where Nidhogg came from also. I continued to use it through college, just as a hobby. I was just posting games online on forums and stuff, getting feedback there, kind of building a community there, entering a community of like-minded, indie developers. Yeah, after college, Nidhogg was getting some traction. I was having a hard time figuring out what to do with it. And I think I met Kristy. I was kind of, I don't know, halfway through. Kristy, what do you think with the game?
Probably like three-quarters of the way through. And then we worked on shipping it together and putting it together. I came on for like the finishing stuff. So it had already been kind of out in the world. People were playing it, but getting to that next step of like, okay, what do we do? Yeah. It needed music. It needed, how do we get from a Game Maker game to deploying it on multiple platforms?
Yes, and we did that. Yeah, Nidhogg was, it was the right time, the right game, and did well, and so fun to have a game that people enjoyed playing. And that's all pre-career, and then Nidhogg took off, and it's like, okay, this is my job now.
Exactly. You found your way into the rhythm. You've released a couple games since then.
I guess I was doing game stuff before that. I was doing contract flash games during that era. Oh, sure. There were some Adult Swim games. So I was supporting myself at that point. I went back to school, went to grad school to try to figure out this whole art game thing. How do I want to show these games? What context? It's fun to show them in person. I was really into the showing Nidhogg and games like that, in a party setting on a big screen. And it's cool. You interact with the game, then you move on and you talk about it, or you just watch the game. I thought that was kind of a more fun space than just downloading a game and starting a comment thread and saying how much you liked or didn't like the game. I thought it's just like more fun to be part of. Like, I'm the type of person that does enjoy like getting into a hole and working on my computer alone. But it is nice to like, once you're done with that, to like share the game with a wider group of human beings that you can like interact with.
Of course.
So I felt like the art world was like kind of a fun way to do that. But you know, Steam is great because the distribution platform, Steam and PlayStation and everything else, it's just like you can't beat it. Like there's no reason not to do it. So
Yeah.
so that's the target market right now. Yeah, and then I don't know. Yeah, Nidhogg 2. You can sort of draw the line yourself there. Why that happened. Yeah. We tried another game in the middle called Flywrench that was a little more like experimental, hardcore. Didn't hit, but and then after Nidhogg 2, we were just like prototyping for a while, I guess, trying out different ideas, and I've always liked bikes as like a subject matter. I never saw myself making a racing game because I don't really play many racing games.
Sure.
But I always wanted to make a game that was like about what I loved about bikes in the real world. So
yeah, and so I think it'd be interesting to talk about the timeline of Wheel World and when these ideas started to come together. So, Kristy, we'll jump to you. What do you remember about the earliest days of thinking about making what would end up becoming Wheel World? Do you remember when those ideas started percolating and what the ideas were that were the seed of Wheel World?
I think real life bicycling around Venice and Santa Monica with each other, but then also separately, Mark would go on these kind of epic 4-hour long bike rides, like pretty much daily. And then he got me into biking just enough that we could go to Japan and do this little tiny bike tour with a couple of our friends.
Oh, cool.
And I think it was enough of like, okay, this is kind of part of our lives. How can we turn this into a project? And Mark had a lot of ideas from being interested in biking and actually biking for a long time, that we started a prototype. And that was the nugget. It was an obsession, a real life obsession that turned into a prototype that turned into this amazing project that we've now just completed.
When did the development start in the prototypes?
2017?
Well, really? I feel like 2019. I don't know. 2017 feels early.
2018? 2018?
Let's say 2019. 2019.
Okay, all right. So, but I find it really fascinating to say that the inspiration for what ended up becoming a very big project for you guys is actually just something you just like doing in real life.
I mean, it's funny because Nidhogg kind of came from me being interested in fencing in college. I didn't get very far, but I did it briefly, and I was just like, "Oh, this is how it works."
Okay, cool. So there's a little through line there. But with actual biking and your love of it, what elements of your love for actual biking, what you enjoy about biking, do you think were things you're like, this could work as a game?
Every time I'd go for a bike ride, I'd like think of some design idea that made a lot of sense when I was on the bike, but then when I got back to the computer, I was like, this doesn't make sense. Like a lot of stamina related things, or like things that like you become good at after cycling for a while. Like you see a hill, you know what gear it has to be, you know where you can rest and where you have to, I don't know, just like things like that just really don't translate to a game where you don't feel which direction is up as much.
Sure, I see, yeah.
So yeah, we tried a lot of stuff like that, a lot of momentum based stuff, a lot of like nutrition based stuff, like more of a survival game. I mean, I would say like at the time, I think the best game that did this that I enjoyed was can't think of it. The little tiny island game where you're a little bird and you go up and you get feathers and you can do more jumps as you get feathers.
Oh, a short hike.
Short hike. But more recently, like Peak is like a great example of this kind of game where it's like, yeah, the main task is like going up these
traversing mountains.
Yeah, just like the pitches. Like in Peak, you see like a series of pitches, and you're like, do I have enough stamina for that pitch? After I get to that crest, I'll be able to like rest and like, whatever, eat items if I need to, and then hit the next pitch depending on what. So like you're breaking down the world into a series of pitches. Similarly, in the short hike, you're doing the same thing with feathers. You're trying to figure out like how far can I go with this many feathers. For a lot of Wheel World, or for the beginning prototypes, I guess, of Wheel World and kind of into development, we had this idea that there were going to be hills like that, and you would look at every hill in that way. And it's just like, it just wasn't fun, because I think partially because like the fun things about a bike for most people, and even like I love to climb hills on a bike, but I have to admit that like it's more fun to come down the hills afterwards.
Sure.
So so I think that like that tension was kind of yeah, it was like it was always pulling the game into this more arcade space where it was like more about the flow and the feel
sure.
of riding a bike and using that momentum rather than like grinding up a hill and like figuring out how to go up a steeper and longer hill. Because I think so
Yeah.
yeah, that was some of the experimentation early on.
Yeah. And Kristy, I'm curious for you about, because you also are someone who loves biking. It's your combined passion for the sport that ends up becoming Wheel World. Do you share those same reasons why you like biking with Mark, or do you have kind of a different perspective?
I think when it comes to sports like biking, or I like snowboarding, the thing that I really like about those kinds of things is being able to put some headphones on and create a vibe.
Sure.
So that's also kind of what I lent to this project is, all right, what music and what soundscapes are going to help to accentuate the game feel stuff that Mark and our designers worked on so well. So that's kind of my thing, not just in the real world, but also in the game. How can we boost the vibe? How can we make the game, the parts of the game where you're exploring and it's not racing necessarily, but can we create moments or help the player create moments of just fun, vibey exploration?
Yeah, I love that. And you are credited as music curator on Wheel World. And I'm curious what that process was like. You as music curator, and you saying that that's something that is also part of your love of real life biking. I'm curious what that process was like, choosing music, choosing genres, and then of course also reaching out to artists, collaborating with people to create the soundtrack for Wheel World, which I think is really, really good.
Yeah, sure.
What was that like, going through that whole process of music curation?
In the beginning, it's kind of like being sensitive to what Mark is trying to make, and what the rest of the team, as we grew the team, what they were trying to make. And then during kind of the middle of production, we had to do a little bit of a pivot, because when you're sensitive to what the design is doing and the design starts moving faster, well, then the songs start moving faster. So we actually had a small pivot during production where the sound designer and I went back to the musicians and were like, we could really use like a faster BPM for the races. I was reacting, the musicians were reacting to what the gameplay was. When it started getting a little faster, we had to react to that and make the music a little faster. So it was a really iterative, collaborative journey that we went on with myself, our sound designer, Tom, with the label Italians Do It Better, and the artists that we worked with, Johnny Jewel, Orion, and June. Everybody was so amazing when we had small pivots. Yeah, and then we actually decided that instead of just having kind of looping songs, which would probably drive you crazy, Johnny Jewel does these kind of longer pieces. We broke down the stems, and there's a percentage chance of different things happening at different times when you're exploring. And those don't have lyrics. So while you're exploring the world, it's not really a looping song that you hear. There are different things that happen. And then once you get into the races, you'll start hearing these like pop songs that also have some of the same effects to them. And then once you get to the bosses, it kind of ramps. You'll start hearing some of those more pop songs with the lyrics. So it's just a lot of different people collaborating towards making this very background vibey thing happen in something that's not a main part of the game, but really we gave a lot of attention and thought to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think what you mentioned most that intrigues me is the idea of pacing, and then music having to match the pacing of Wheel World, which is actually a mix of casual exploration of a big open map and then focusing in on I gotta beat these people when you're in the races, which are placed into the open world. And that's a thing that I think is so interesting about Real World is this is an open world game. And if you've played any of your previous works, that is a complete 180. And I really want to dig into that from your design perspective, Mark. What elements of Real World, particularly being an open world game, were, I mean, frankly, the hardest to work on? Because that seems to be something that would be scope-wise, complexity-wise, something that was a really big jump for you.
I think a lot of it was just ended up being technical stuff. I mean, we tried time and again to like front load the technical aspects and like create tools that we could use to like, create stuff in the open world or in smaller scenes that would then be inserted into the larger mesh of scenes. As hard as we tried, it was hard to like actually get ahead of it. It's hard to know every problem you would encounter performance-wise and everything else. So it was this like inevitable like push and pull between like some weeks we were working on the performance, some weeks we were working on design. Then it would just like go back and forth in that fashion, just because it is just hard to like have that many objects on screen. It's hard to like know how many polys you can use to make meshes early on in the game, because just like the scale is just tough. Anytime you changed how fast the player moved, that would sort of affect how much of the world they were going to travel through in a given amount of time.
Of course,
so
yeah.
that kind of affects the scale of the world as a whole. We remade most of the map. Like the map file for the first world, Tremonto, is called Tremonto 5, and it has been for years. But that's because like we remade it at least 5 times with that title.
Yeah, interesting.
But by the 5th iteration, we were pretty adept at like just like mutating it. We had we had a great number of tools at that point to like pull things apart, to work on them in small pieces and then bring them back, to like shift nodes around and have the world kind of heal itself in between. We used a mix of like procedural stuff and a lot of hand authoring and hand. The final frame is like pretty well hand modeled in terms of like the terrain and all the objects on top of the terrain. The open world technically was challenging. Then design wise, it was also like pretty hard to figure out like what sort of progression players would have. How do we like adapt the gameplay to offer a challenge throughout, or at least to like signal to the player where the challenge should be found. Looked at a lot of stuff from Zelda to Assassin's Creed. I mean, it's a great thing about open world games is there's so many of them, so you can like really lean on other design tropes and push where you want to push. So
yeah. Well, I'm curious about the things that from your previous works, because we're talking about how this is so different from those other games, that you might have learned while working on those games that did help you to prepare for this. Do you think there's any through lines, any technical elements, any design elements making Nidhogg, Fly Wrench, Nidhogg 2 that did prepare you for it, or was it just like being dropped into the deep end?
We did decide that while we were making an open world game, we were not going to make an open world online multiplayer game.
Right.
Okay.
I recognize that this is a game that could work well with multiplayer, but we know how much that costs in development time, so we decided not to do that this time. I think just like playtesting often. I mean, with this project, there were many times when like it was hard to do a playtest because the project was in a weird state. But as much as we could, playtest often, get feedback, and adjust. Yeah, we did a lot of adjustments. And, I was pulling from not only my experience design-wise, but also like we had a great team of people that came and helped the design along the way. Insert long list of names.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. By the way, if you're watching this and you worked on Wheel World, just imagine he said your name.
No, I mean, like most closely at the end, I was working with MSB, who's our lead. I forget the credits. Sorry.
Lead designer.
Lead designer. Yeah, okay. Yeah, lead designer MSB. It was great. But the engineers also lent plenty of help with design, not only just implementation. So it's game dev, so everyone's a mix. So we had MSB, Sam Loshin, Momin Khan, Matthias Longstrom. I actually don't know how to say his last name. I've known him for like 15 years.
Well, I do think that actually that's another topic that I wanted to dig into is the way that your team had to grow and the collaborators you're working with had to grow over the course of working on Real World, which, as we've mentioned, is a much larger scale project. What challenges or pros and cons did you get from working with a bigger team to create a bigger project?
The biggest challenge I would say was like just the nature of remote collaboration on a project that needs like tight collaboration. everyone's in different time zones for one thing, so it's hard to find like times when you can be online. I think we kind of settled on this sort of almost quasi virtual office where we have a Discord server. I mean, this is probably the same story everywhere. We have a Discord server where you can just hang out in and just like move between rooms if you want to talk to different people in a more informal setting. But we also had like structured meetings at least once a day, just to like check in. The team was around 10 people at its height. So that's, you got to check in pretty often, I think.
I mean, Mark and I, for example, in the very beginning, Mark and I both used to work in the office that he's in. But as our team grew and as our own needs grew, we had to split up so that when we were taking different calls with different team members, it wasn't like a cacophony of crazy.
Yeah, so like physically, Kristy and I live together. We're married. We live in the same house. But then, we're sitting next to each other. But no one else that worked on the team ever. I mean, people have come here occasionally, but pretty much everyone works from home.
Sure.
Everybody works from their home, not our home. So
that was implied.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's just the biggest challenge. It's just like, 10 people touching a project. Also, it's just like you have to have a lot of rules about who can push code and why, when, and who gets to have approval of that and all that stuff. Unity has large files, and so our Git repository got quite large, and there's like so many challenges that just come up as you scale, not only with people but also like the project size. Those are the challenges, but also like the benefits are just like more heads, more ideas. You can try things out quickly.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I think now where we are with our team, everybody's works really well together. And it's really nice when somebody has an idea, everybody's really open to hearing, let's say an engineer has a design suggestion, that'll be, considered as much as anything else. So.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And back to map design, something I'm curious about, as I've never made a racing game before, but is designing different tracks. And that's also something that you had to probably teach yourself for working on this game. And I'm curious what it's like making sure that the racing tracks are fun. Obviously, that's step one, but there's enough variety between them, and that they fit into the open world. And so I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on this. Track design wise, like what's the experience like making sure that you've got a full game of a variety of tracks that then work within this larger ecosystem?
In one of the prototypes, we didn't have like races per se. We had like time trials along a set route.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with the app Strava. It's like a fitness app people use mostly for cycling, but also for like running. And it just maps where you went on a map, like on a GPS map. And then it knows how fast you went. And then if you went on the same route as somebody else, it creates like a high score for that route. And so you can see like if you beat your previous score, where you were on the leaderboards. And so that was sort of the idea with like the map design of just be like, this is just a route in the world. And, the turns are a function of some person taking this route. And I know like everything's designed in a game, so it's not really how it works, but it was kind of a mix of like world building and design. So a lot of the map, our environmental artist, Dan Hunter, art director, I guess, but also like he was sort of more on the environmental stuff. He did a lot of like the zone design. Like he would be like, okay, we would decide one area is like vineyards, say. And so he would go, do a deep dive into like vineyards in Italy, vineyards in France, and all this. And he would like look at the maps. He would bring some of the road data in. He would create his own road data based on those patterns. And designer, I would come in and like make it the right scale. I would try to like figure out, if there were distinct areas, like how do we make every area feel like its own little world? Then we had these estates put in. Then it sort of felt like, okay, with all these estates, each one could be like could be the site of a local gang, and you do a race around it in some fashion. So then I'd look at the roads around there, and sometimes I'd just see like a race route that I could do. I would ride that a bit in the game and like adjust things accordingly to like make it feel good, make the inclines in the right places and whatnot. So that's one version. Another version's like, oh man, there's this like empty space we haven't really arted out too much. What can we put here? How about like, a BMX track? And so we'll make like a totally custom BMX track totally separately, which is then later brought in and like planted in place. That's sort of the mix. Like purely environmental based, like I see it in the world and that becomes a racetrack more or less, and like purpose built separately and brought in and then like woven into the rest of the tracks. Once it's in the world, like even if it's one that I just found, I then pull it out and like work on it separately. Track design, I don't know. I mean, a lot of the track design is also like that you need the turns to keep it spicy and like give yourself a reason to like push yourself to a point where you might fly off the track and whatnot.
Sure. Yeah.
But also we wanted the game to feel like alive with the other opponents, so we made this whole AI system. They pathfind and they kind of bounce off each other, and we had this whole set of behaviors, many of which we didn't use because it was just too complex with all the turns that we added to the game. I don't know, it's all about like the way the AI reacts to you, and the AI has like a bit of a script in the track of like when and where they'll use their like virtual sprint. Like you have this ghostly boost sprint that you get to use, but they also get to like, you know, pedal a little bit faster in certain situations. So it's kind of, it's like embracing the rubber band nature of most video game racing, because like these are not cars, these are people that have to like conserve power until they need it. So it is rubber banding, but it has this internal logic to it that's not just like pure rubber banding. There are limitations, like if they sprint once, they can't sprint again immediately.
Sure.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, and Kristy, I'm also curious for you, what working on a racing game, what kind of things you had to learn or teach yourself or play other games that might have helped inform some design decisions.
This is all Mark.
Okay, fair enough.
There are certain things that I watch and I get excited about, but not my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
No, you know what? That is a fair answer.
But yeah, I mean, I like, you know, I played a lot of F-Zero as a kid, and I played a lot of, you know, Burnout Paradise when I discovered that a few years back.
Yeah. Well, another element of this game that sets it apart from your previous works is a bigger focus on narrative. There's a lot of characters in this, and they have got their own little stories, and there's a larger overarching narrative. And I found that really interesting. And I'm curious for you, and of course the team and everyone, what it was like kind of trying to get something going that was a little bit more narrative focused, and that there is quite a bit of dialogue and, you know, a little bit of character progression and things. And why for this racing game did you feel that a narrative was something important to kind of more foreground in this game?
I just felt like if we were going with the open world trope, then there ought to be something stringing it all together. So, I mean, this story, originally there were going to be fewer races and more like quest lines that were more just like kind of go here, go there for different narrative reasons. And because those weren't like fun to play, and I don't think this story was necessarily the reason they weren't fun to play, those kind of dwindled, and then we were left with like more of this, you know, exploration racing stuff, and it just felt like, okay, you're gonna get tired of racing. You're not gonna want to just like race. You're gonna want to have these moments of exploration and just like chill out. It's nice to see like new vistas and everything, but it's probably nice to talk to people too and just like get little bits of something, whatever it is. And so, yeah, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out the story. But in the end, I think the story was like, it's very minimal, right? Yeah.
Just because it's more involved doesn't mean it's super involved.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good balance.
A lot of players probably don't want any story, which is fine. So we wanted to keep it concise and like kind of funny when we could, and like kind of just load it up with as many like biking in jokes as possible. And
Yeah.
And then the more I did that, the more I was like, all right, maybe this should kind of like be the lore. Like this is a bike nerd world, and the god is like a bike nerd. It was fun to ideate on that. We had a bunch of writers a couple different writers that worked on the game, and in the end, MSB and I did a lot of writing as well. Just like what we found for our team was it was hard to like write ahead of where the design was. So every time we'd look forward with the writing, the design would like take another path because we were just trying to like follow what was fun about what we made, rather than like we knew the story was never going to be like the reason people played. And so it didn't feel right to like follow the story like dogmatically, like, okay, the story is going to have to shift. They're just words after all. So.
And Kristy, I'm curious for you. Was there any involvement on your end from helping to make the world of the story or anything?
Now, I mean, I have very few interests here.
Kristy's very into the process, I would say, of the whole like thing getting built, and like she takes a lead on like just figuring out how we all work together efficiently and putting out fires and that sort of thing. In addition to the music stuff,
which is not really fun to talk about.
But it's interesting to work on. It's an interesting facet, you know.
I think it can lead to some interesting stories, though. And I actually am curious for you, and what were some of those fires you had to put out? Like, what were some of the big challenges that you leading the team, making sure that things weren't falling apart at the seams? Do you remember any moments or things you really had to struggle to figure out while working on the game?
I'm not sure if I remember specific moments. I'm really like more of a let's move forward kind of person. So my brain is kind of constantly looking forward. Just generally speaking, in terms of like a lot of the team are constantly trying to like widen the scope. And so my job is
included,
job is to just help everybody kind of narrow. It's like it's a delicate balance of letting people get creative and get wild, and then try and narrow the scope for everybody, whether it's like engineers or artists or design. So sometimes my like gentle narrowing is fibbing a little bit with what the deadlines are. Sometimes I know there's a deadline that I know we have, but even Mark doesn't know. So there are this is just years of working with Mark, years of working with other people, that the drop dead date is not usually the first date that I give people as the deadline. And that's part of this process, right? We're gonna narrow, we're gonna make sure that we're trying to like hit our deadlines. And it's game dev, so it's rare that we get there. And that's my personal goal for getting better at my job, is just taking the experience from the last 3 games, taking the experience from this project and moving forward, and just trying to be better at anticipating where we might have some stumbling blocks, anticipating are we overscoping whatever it is too early, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would say like pretty much everyone on the team has some history of like indie game development, like solo indie game development in many cases. So like I think people are used to like just kind of tunnel vision, like let's just get this done, this is the feature, I see it, I know how it's all going to work, I can do everything. But then obviously like working with other people complicates that, and like whether or not your vision was perfect, it's going to be like it's going to have like knock-on effects everywhere you look. So just like trying to tame the passions of the team, I guess.
Interesting.
It's also trying to figure out like, okay, what are the nuggets that somebody's really obsessed with and really wants to like get out there, and can we take that nugget and like shed the rest of it? Are there pieces that we can leave behind that might take a long time? Sometimes that's just me passively being in a meeting and being a fly on the wall, which is what I like will often just jump into a meeting, and it might not be my meeting, but I'll just try and suggest. Everybody got really used to me suggesting, how long is that going to take? Oh, well, can we maybe wait on that? Is there the nugget? Like, can we get to the nugget? Do we have to spend all the other time doing? So yeah, that's part of my not very glorious job.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, I mean, it is important to manage scope, and again, what I find interesting about Real World is it is a much bigger scope game than the ones you've previously worked on, and I'm curious what you then feel about working on a game that's much bigger in scope than your previous works, but then also resulting in one chicken the egg situation, but also resulting in a much larger and longer development cycle to actually end up finishing the game. And I'm curious how you feel about that timeline. Are you excited to have something that takes this long and you really put a ton of time into it, or do you feel like maybe for future projects you want to scale back now that you've had this 6-year time?
I think it was really, really nice to be able to do this project. We would never have been able to do it without the help and support of Annapurna. We could not be happier with our partnerships there. It was an incredibly ambitious project that we were lucky enough to be able to partner with them and do. So I would absolutely say that it is only because of that partnership that we're able to do such an ambitious, exciting game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that said, I don't know if I would like jump into. I mean, our next projects that we have planned are not quite as large in scope, so
Mhm.
I'm excited to like have a bit of a change of pace in that
Yeah.
sense. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't turn down a long project in the future. I just wouldn't want to go like back to back.
Yeah, no,
Probably.
that definitely makes sense. And I'm glad that you brought up Annapurna because that's another thing I kind of want to talk about is this is the first game that you haven't self-published, as far as
Right.
I know, if that's
Yes.
correct. Yeah. And so I'm curious how that dynamic changes. Of course, it with their support, it gives you a little bit less stress of having to like get things out like quicker. But what other things maybe did Annapurna help teach you about the publishing process? What did you learn from them? Maybe what they learned from you? How's it been kind of having another outside force assisting with the production of the game?
Well, it was nice to not have the financial pressure. We have a kid and a mortgage, and we wanted to be ambitious still. We wanted to like take creative risks, but it felt like that was tricky. So like we not only wanted to like check out this whole 3D game development world and like work with the team and do something ambitious. So these are all like new things we had to learn, and so it's great to have the support of a publisher that could bankroll that. And yeah, we learned. I mean, we learned how to do it. We did it.
I mean, there are also a lot of things that we, as like single publishers, don't have access to.
Oh, okay.
Whether it's making larger deals with platform holders, or maybe I just didn't know that these things were possible. So in the future, now we know whether we're working with a publisher again or whether we're working on our own. We learned that there are certain deals that you can try and negotiate, but from where we sit, we couldn't have done this project on our own, even if we did have the funding. The support isn't just they're helping us with money. The support really comes through with the expertise that everybody brings to the table, and that has been priceless.
Yeah, yeah. We use Unity, which is great, but when you're in a development cycle this long, you're going to be out of date with like the latest version of Unity, or we're doing specific things with features that maybe not a lot of teams have done. So it was nice to have not only the upped support level that Annapurna pays for to like get in touch with Unity, but also like people on Annapurna's team. I think Matt Wilkinson now, but John McElroy previously, and Sarf. They had a lot of experience like releasing games and dealing with like very technical aspects of Unity and the pipeline and like getting on consoles and like issues that would crop up. So it was nice just to have that resource rather than like spending, like halting development basically when these things rose up. And yeah, it was just nice to like be able to like use their resources. Yeah, human resources.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, and the final thing I kind of want to talk about is small decisions that go into making a game that is, again, quite big in scope, especially for your team. But the small decisions, and Kristy and Mark, I want to talk about both of your sides of this. Small decisions you think people might not really realize or notice while they're playing this game, things that you are really proud of, like, okay, we finally ended up executing on this, but maybe it'll go a little bit under recognized.
I mean, I think I definitely spoke earlier about the care and attention that we spent thinking through the pacing and the subtlety and the needs of the music as it changes throughout the gameplay. That's something that I hope that people don't notice outright because it's supposed to be a background element.
Sure, fair.
We made so many tools to make this game. And I'm proud of those tools, and I could talk about them. But stuff like the map editor, the AI editor,
Sure.
The parts editor, the character editor. We have all these crazy systems we made that we're just dev focused. Like if I wanted to make an NPC, like rather than ask Dan to model a new NPC, I could just like use his character creator and use this like crazy library of parts to like Mr. Potato Head a new person,
Yeah,
set him
cool.
up with like some emotes, and then put him in the scene. Use our custom built flowchart system to script up some behavior, write some dialogue, and then I could like drop in a rate, like all this stuff. You can get like a first pass of like all the major gameplay systems. Like I can rough something out in an hour, like or less than an hour for like a race with AI and everything you see in the game in the final version. So it was really nice to have those tools, and yeah, we could keep making this game for a long time very easily. But yeah, I mean, our tools are great. No one's going to see the tools. So.
Yeah. Well, let's close out by just talking about that the project is finally coming to a close. As of yeah, exactly. Well, and I'm curious, just like, what are the emotions you're feeling? I mean, the game comes out as of recording in about a week, and people will be playing it. It'll be in the hands of people on the different systems, and you'll get a lot of reviews. Hopefully it'll be good. How are you feeling? This long process is coming to a close. What are the emotions like for you and the team?
Both excited and nervous, right? When you're
Yeah.
making something for this long, that only a couple people in the world have played. It feels like I really hope that people like it. I think that's really like the major overarching vibe in our office.
Yeah, I guess just holding my breath. Not because I'm worried, but just because hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Breathe,
And,
Mark, breathe.
Yeah, I know I will breathe at some point. So, yeah, anticipating that breath is,
Yeah.
exciting.
I know, absolutely. And once it's out, you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
No, I mean, I'm sure we'll be very busy also once it's out. And like, just, we've had many rounds of QA and this and that, but, there's so many computers out there with different configurations, and so many people bashing at keyboards and finding new bugs in new areas that might not have, been found before. So yeah, we'll be busy with updates and whatnot.
Well, I mean, that's actually something that's kind of interesting, and thank you to you and your team. Is while I was playing an early version of the game, pre-release, I had a bug that was causing me issues from
Right.
continuing it.
Right, I remember.
And
Yeah.
I thought it was excellent how quick we were able to kind of back and forth, kind of talk through these things. And,
That was an alarming bug, though. So.
well, I'm glad that I'm glad I caught it and not release day.
Yeah.
But congrats to you and the team for knowing this process
Thank you.
deep enough to be able to like respond to it so quickly.
Yeah. Well, I've had a lot of practice with like many different play testers, and like, if we have the log files, we have the information to fix it usually. So thank you for sending those.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Kristy and Mark, both of you, for sitting down, talking about Whale World. I will, of course, be including in the description of the video all links to make sure you go buy it yourself, or I believe it's also coming to Xbox Game Pass. You can try it out through that. Any final notes before we close it out?
Shout out to the Wheel World team. Couldn't have done it without you.
Yeah, thank you everybody at Annapurna. Thank you everybody at the Wheel World team.
Well, that is something. It's kind of a tongue twister. Did you guys ever think about that? Well, also, actually, hold on. We got to talk about one more thing. There's a name change for the game. It was revealed as Ghost Spike.
Yeah,
Wheel World is now the final name for.
Well,
the
I think we were talking earlier. I mean, the game kind of shifted focus from. I mean, not that it was a narrative game, but it was more narrative focused. And when we stripped that out,
it was a slower game. It was more narrative focused.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying there was like a hidden game that you could play. It's just like as the game morphed, it didn't have that same narrative. It was a little bit cheekier. It didn't clear the bar for like the subject matter. So gameplay wise, so yeah, I felt like we should change it, and Annapurna was supportive of that, so we did. And I always like the phrase "Welcome to the Wheel World," because
it's hard for me to say.
The Matrix was such a big moment for me as a child. So.
Oh, I get it now. Oh my god! All right, well, I think that does close everything out. Thank you, Mark and Kristy, both for joining
Thank you, Tucker.
We've talked about a lot of stuff here, and I'm really happy that you joined me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Tucker. Thanks for having us.